She touched my hand and he watched. From that moment, nothing was the same. I remember the room dim with golden lamplight, soft music drifting from the corner speaker, a velvet hum in the silence between us. He sat across from me, eyes cool and confident, leaning casually in his chair, a drink glinting in his glass. And she hovered beside me, just a hair's breadth away, like a shadow I was drawn to. Our fingers collided, pressed against the small of the table. She let her hand brush, but didn't pull away. Attention, my heart jolted. My breath caught. In that electric second, I knew the balance had shifted. Interest. I'd known both of them for years, him my steady presence, my anchor. And her my friend's partner's sister, the one we all thought of as safe, polite, quiet. No one suspected she carried a deep, unspoken current. But tonight, in the hush between chords, I felt her pull, her curiosity, her hunger. Everything changed when she didn't recoil. She wore a pale silk dress that caught the light and shimmered faintly. Her hair curled softly at her shoulders, scent of jasmine and something warm. I watched how she turned slightly, not intentionally, so her knee brushed mine. I caught the subtle shift, the angle of her elbow, the weight in her gaze. I felt him watching over my shoulder, his silhouette rigid but his eyes roving. I knew he sensed the tension too, though he masked it. Desire. My mind spun. What was she doing? Why now? Was this a mistake or a revelation? The air between us crackled. I felt alive, tremulous in a way I rarely let myself be. To touch her back? To pull closer? The temptation swallowed every thought. But every move would be visible, to him, to her, to the night itself. I tried to steady my voice. "You're cold," I said softly, as though she'd nudged me inadvertently. But I meant every shade of that. She offered a half-smile, as though daring me to take more. His throat cleared behind me. I heard his voice, low but certain. "Is everything okay over there?" It sounded casual, but it carried a tension undercurrent that made my skin prick. She didn't retract her hand. She just tilted her head, eyes meeting his with a question that held more challenge than apology. My mind raced. A swirl of guilt, adrenaline, excitement. I wanted to look away, to withdraw, but my gaze refused me. I watched her, the lines of her jaw, the softness in her eyes, holding a secret. She still held my hand. He leaned forward, the chair creaking slightly, and his stare flicked between her and me. I felt exposed, like we were under a spotlight no one had switched on. My fingertips trembled. I almost pulled away. Instead, I felt her squeeze ever so faintly, not enough to hurt, just enough to remind me of presence, of heat. I swallowed. I tried to settle a steady tone. "Yes, just thinking." My throat was dry. My heartbeat drummed in my ears. She drew a breath, eyes trained on me. I saw in her glance a question, a hesitation, a dare. And then she withdrew slowly, just enough to break that brush of skin. But the charge remained. I felt it humming between us like a low current. He looked at me sharply. "We should get more wine," he suggested, half-smile brittle. I nodded, though my mouth felt thick. I stood, excusing myself as she rose too. We moved in that fragile dance. Me in front, her behind, and him trailing. The lights glowed softer in the hallway. Once in the adjacent room, just the three of us, the air felt sharper. She trailed a finger along the wall, as though steadying herself. I watched her silhouette cast in amber light. I wanted to turn, press my palm to her back, ask her what she was doing to me. But he spoke again, his voice easy. "I'll be right back, want anything?" He swept his glance at me first, then her. She nodded slightly and he left. The door clicked behind him, and the sudden silence felt like a vacuum. She turned to me. No hesitation now. Her eyes darkened. "Do you feel that?" She whispered the word, that hanging thick in the air. I nodded, though I felt breathless. She moved closer, almost dangerously so. My pulse thudded back and forth in my ears. Her breath warmed my cheek. "I've wanted to do this," she murmured. Her hand slid toward mine again. I could feel my pulse in my throat, like a living thing trying to escape me. Her fingers held mine, gentle but firm. Her thumb brushed the pad of my index finger in a silent little caress. The contact was electric. Everything else dissolved, except for our hearts in that split second of contact. Her gaze never left me. I watched how her lips parted, how her breath caught. The space between us was lit by unspoken questions. She leaned in so slightly that I felt her hair brush my cheek. I caught a scent, jasmine musk, something private. My mind shuddered. I should have pulled away. I should have remembered boundaries. But I was hypnotized. I tried to shift, just enough that my shoulder nudged hers, but she followed seamlessly, matching. Our knees brushed beneath the table earlier. Now there was no table. Her presence brushed me wholly. Attention coiled in me. Exhilaration and fear tangled into one. I whispered, "We shouldn't." But she hushed me with her eyes and kept holding. She told me, "I've watched you for months." In a voice so quiet I barely recognized it as her own. My brow furrowed. The confession staggered me. She said she'd seen me, noticed me, in gatherings across rooms, in my laugh lines, in my silences. That part of me no one knew. My heart pounded. I realized this was more than a flirtation. She had been building to this, calculating, longing. And now here we were, exposed. We moved, unspoken but deliberate, toward the couch that lined one wall. She guided me there, fingers still entwined, and we sat. The leather beneath us resisted slightly as we settled. She leaned back, letting her hand rest lightly atop mine. Her thigh curled near mine, not touching but urgent in its proximity. I watched her chest rise and fall. I watched her eyes trace the line of my jaw. And I felt the impossible weight of knowing him would return any second, witnessing this. Yet I couldn't pull away. I began to worry, what if he came back now? Would he see the look in my eyes? The curve of her body toward me? The way our hands still clasped? She spoke, voice low. "I've had fantasies." My breath caught. "About you." She paused. I closed my eyes, letting that land, letting the heat bloom and sting. But then the key turned in the lock. My heart leapt. Her hand tightened on mine. Time slowed. He entered. He saw us seated, hands clasped, faces inches apart. He stood there, rooted, as though we had painted some unspeakable scene on the wall. His eyes darted between us, me, her, then back to me. Something raw flared in his expression. Surprise, betrayal, confusion. I felt a rush of guilt and fear. She released my hand, just a breath, then rose from the couch. Her movement was deliberate, calm, as though she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 nights in her mind. She held herself tall, defiant. I stood too, heart slamming. He opened his mouth, then shut it. For a long beat, none of us moved. Finally she said, "I didn't mean to," but didn't finish. Her composure flickered. Her lips trembled. I saw the conflict playing in her bones. He strode forward slowly. The distance closed. He asked, voice quiet but dangerous, "What's going on?" His tone was edged like a blade. I stepped between them, not to protect exactly but to anchor myself. "He doesn't understand," she said, turning toward him. "I've loved her for a long time." Her eyes flicked to me, then back to him. Shock slammed into me. My chest twisted. "Loved me?" I asked, voice strangled. She nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes. I felt more for her than I ever admitted." He stared, color draining. I watched his fingers tremble. I felt the walls contracting around us. I tried to explain, fumbling. "This isn't about you. It's about her. It's about what we both feel." My voice cracked. He looked away, pacing. Silence fell heavy. Her gaze went to the floor. She looked at me, wounded and bold all at once. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I reached toward her, but hesitation rooted me. His presence filled the room. Then, unexpected, he laughed, low and bitter, and shook his head. "You two are mad." He scoffed. His voice broke. "Crazy." Her face hardened. She squared her shoulders. "Maybe we are." And then she turned, head held high, and walked out the door. I watched her go. My heart felt like it shattered. He came toward me, but I flinched. He grabbed my hands, fierce and pained. "Why?" he cried. "Why?" I collapsed onto the couch after she left, and he stayed standing above me, the room heavy with aftermath. The silence pressed in. I could feel his rage, his betrayal, his grief. I could feel my own heart splitting. He knelt before me, and gently dragged me upright to meet his eyes. "Tell me," he demanded. "Tell me it didn't mean anything." Words stuck in my throat. I shook my head. I couldn't lie. But I also feared the confession would rip us apart entirely. I whispered, "It meant everything." His face contorted. He looked away. He pounded the wall quietly and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they glistened. "Then tell me why," he said hoarsely. So I told him about how I had fallen slowly for her presence, for her quiet strength, about how I'd felt something hollow in my life that she filled, just by watching me, listening to me, brushing a hand across mine. I told him I never meant to break us, but that in the moment she touched me, something inside me woke. As I spoke, he listened, rigid but racked with grief. I watched him, every taut line of his face. I begged forgiveness silently on my knees. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "Do you want her?" His voice was distant, as though he were asking about someone else. My breath hitched. "Yes," I admitted softly, fearfully, truly. He closed his eyes again, then shook his head. He stood and turned away. I felt the room tilt. I rose, trying to reach him, but he retreated to the window and stared out at the city lights. The night felt hollow. I sank beside him, silent. The space between us changed. A chasm had opened. Then I felt a presence behind me. The door swung open. She stood in the frame, half in shadow, half in light. She looked at us with something fierce in her eyes. She didn't say a word. She just walked to me, knelt beside me, and placed a hand on my cheek. Her fingers flicked across my jaw. My eyes closed. Her words echoed. I felt my heart skip. He froze. The air rippled with tension. He said nothing, he just stared. She rose and moved between us. Her back to him, but her face toward me, fingers still lightly touching my skin. She said softly, "I want both of you." I looked from her to him and back. The audacity of it struck me, the purity of her longing. And I felt something in me, bold, reckless, hopeful. He swallowed hard. "Both?" he finally said, voice ragged. She nodded, eyes unwavering. "Yes." He took a step toward her, anger and desperation battling. "You're insane." She looked at him, unmoved. "Maybe," she whispered. "But I'm not stepping back. Not this time." He clenched his fists. "But that's not fair." I stood and moved closer to her instinctively. She rested a hand on my waist, guiding me, uniting us. I felt her breath warm my cheek. I looked at him. I said, "I can't do this without her." The truth poured out. Everything felt exposed. He laughed again, long and broken. "You think that's choice?" he spat. "You think she'll stay?" She stepped forward, closer to him, bridging the space. "I will stay," she said calmly. "If he accepts me." He looked between us, torn. His eyes burned. "And if I can't?" She met his gaze. "Then I will. I'll leave you both with the consequences." He sank to his knees in front of us. The weight of the decision etched on his face. My chest rose and fell, torn between fear and desire. She moved to him, brushing her hand over his cheek. He flinched, recoiled, then leaned into it as though he fought every inch. I watched, stunned by their vulnerability. He whispered, "I don't know if I can love you both." Her voice cracked. "Just try." In that moment, the room felt infinite and collapsing all at once. I looked down at him, my chest heavy with the weight of souls. I reached and touched his cheek. "I do," I said tightly. "I always have." His eyes glistened. He brushed my hand away, not harshly, but with hesitation. His face was vulnerable, fractured. He looked at her. "Do you love her more?" he asked. She knelt beside him and grasped his hands. "I love you both," she whispered. "Not in halves, not parts. Whole." He drew in a ragged breath. The silence stretched. The room seemed suspended in that breath. I edged closer. The three of us, entangled in an orbit we never invited but that gravity insisted upon, moved toward each other. Their eyes held mine held theirs. She stood, extended her hand to him. He hesitated, then she drew him up. He trembled, uncertain. She guided him near me. He looked at me, disbelieving. I reached for him, my hand brushing his. He flinched. I waited, hurt but patient. She squeezed his hand. "Let me show you," she said quietly. He swallowed. He looked at me, the space small between our faces. He leaned in and hesitated. I held my breath. Then he kissed my cheek. Then my lips, soft, questioning. My world shuddered. I felt her lean into us, the shift in air, the joined orbit. I felt his arms tremble around me, mine around him. I felt her presence weaving through. I almost cried. The ache of longing, guilt, wonder, relief all warred in me. But then somewhere behind the trio of us, a soft chime, the sound of a phone. The spell cracked. He lurched apart. She inhaled sharply. I did too. He stepped back, breathing heavily. "This is insane," he said, voice trembling. I nodded, tears in my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. But she clasped our hands again, bridging us. "We'll find a way," she insisted. "If you both let me." The night stretched long. We sat together, the three of us, entwined in a silence that throbbed. I felt her warm hand in mine. His other hand rested lightly on my shoulder. Our bodies were close but not pressed. The distance was charged. I looked at him. "I don't know what comes next," I confessed. He exhaled. "I don't either." She leaned forward, pressing a kiss to his cheek, then mine. "We'll figure it out," she whispered. We talked, halting, trembling, about boundaries, about fear, jealousy, love. He confessed how terrified he was, how betrayed. I told him how I felt torn between loyalty and longing. She admitted the risk she felt, the vulnerability she laid bare. In the early hours, exhaustion and adrenaline sedimented. He drew us both to him, and we formed an impossible, tender shape of three. I closed my eyes and felt the press of his chest, the warmth of her lips on my shoulder. We stayed like that until dawn, wordless except for soft breaths. When the first pale light crept through the window, he rose gently, pulling us up. He kissed us both on the forehead, on the cheek. He touched me, then her, like a prayer. He said quietly, "I can't promise this will be perfect." I held his gaze, tears shining. "I don't need perfect." She nodded, smile trembling. "Only real." We agreed we would move slowly. We would communicate. We would hold each other's fears. We would try. Weeks passed. Some days were fragile, jealousy spiked, hearts wounded. But we talked. We adjusted. We loved. Moments came when he held me just for me. Moments when she whispered secrets in my ear. Moments when I held them both, solid and trembling. I learned to accept the messy complexity, the moral ambiguity. I learned that desire doesn't always obey rules, and hearts don't always choose neat paths. I found that sometimes the deepest truth is in the collision, the risk, the choice to stay even when fear screams.